So GoodReads has recently added the reread function, and this has been exciting news. So I thought to celebrate that, I'm just going to talk a bit about rereading and my thoughts on it. I have this real desire to reread. I've only been reading books for about 8 years, but there's this constant urge to come back to the books that have really stuck with me. And I've talked a lot about my Project 5000, which is my constant reminder that there are only a limited amount of books I'll be able to read in my lifetime. I estimate 5,000 books, and this was an estimation based on reading 100 books a year. And I don't always read that, but I have this number in my head, and I keep reminding myself I need to constantly be reading books that I really want to read, because I don't have time to read shit. I don't have time to read books that aren't that interesting to me. And Project 5000 is there to remind me to pick the best books possible, to pick the books that will interest me, and not books that seem to be talked about a lot or seem to be popular or any other reason apart from the fact that I would really want to read it. And there is this struggle within me to make sure I hit 5,000 books, because there are so many books I want to read, but there's also this desire to reread, and I think rereading is very important. I think it's something we need to do, and thankfully GoodReads have fixed the functionality for rereading on their site, which means tracking rereads is so much easier. And it's not perfect, there's a few bugs, and I've found a few issues that I have to work through, but I have an idea of how I would track this. But getting back to rereading, I did a video recently where I talked about rereading books that I hated, and the idea that sometimes rereading will give you more insight and you might be in a different mood, so you might enjoy the book a second time. An example I cited in that video was The Catcher in the Rye, and I hated this book the first time because I thought Holden Caulfield was such a whiny, annoying character, and this is not normally a reason why I would hate a book. And I love unlikable characters, I love angst, I love emo literature, so I have no idea why this book didn't work for me the first time. So I thought maybe I had to reread it just to understand. Maybe it was just my mood at the time. But rereading has multiple pros and cons, and like pros for rereading would be new insight, you get a deeper understanding, you'll find things that you missed the first time, and you have a basic of the plot, so you'll be picking up other little aspects in the book that you missed. And this is great for your personal development, because you realize how much you've grown as a person, you realize how much you've grown as a reader, and I think this is important. I think this is something that is well worth. Take for example Slaughterhouse 5, which I read in 2010, and I have not stopped thinking about this book. I keep wanting to go back to it because I feel like there's more in it that I have not dissected. There's more that I need to discover, and that's a book that I probably have to reread again, and I just probably have to do that instead of keep thinking about it. And I'm curious to see what I get out of it the next time I read it. So rereading can be a good thing for your personal development. I reread Ex Libris recently in November actually, and it's a book that I want to dip in and out of constantly because I love the writing and it's something I want to strive for, so it becomes sort of like a textbook, and I feel like I need to come back again and again just to get inspiration, just to put me back on the track that I want to be on towards my writing abilities. Or things like Either Or by Soren Kierkegaard, which I'm still reading at the moment. I'm about close to halfway through it, but I'm already planning to reread this because there's so much in this, and I know that I'm going to constantly get more out of it. I'm dipping more and more into philosophy, so I'm already prepared to dip back into this once I know more about Kierkegaard, once I know more about philosophy, and see what I get out of this book when I become more versed in the topics he's talking about. And Kierkegaard is a very intelligent person, and there's so much to dissect in this book, so this is something that I would definitely have to come back to again and again. But it's not just rereading for the sake of seeing what you missed or for personal development. Sometimes you just want to reread a book that's a favourite. Sometimes you want to be sure that you're reading something that you're going to enjoy, and curious to see what you think of it, curious to see if it still holds up, and things like Substantial Love Story by Gary Steingart is something I really want to reread because I really enjoyed it the first time, and I'm curious to see what I think about it now. And there's something about it that kind of stuck with me. I read Gary Steingart's memoir called Little Failure, and I'm curious to come back to this because I want to see how autobiographical this book is, knowing more about Gary Steingart's life, and I'm just curious to see what will happen. And there's obviously classics that I want to reread because they're great books, and I just love reading books that really stick with me and leave an impression of me. Something like A Clockwork Orange, which I really adore. I think it took a little bit to get to understand the dialect, and there's so much in this book, and I found it such a rewarding experience reading it the first time. I want to come back to it as a more developed person, as a way to dip back into something that really stuck with me. And I keep saying this, but I'm pushed and I feel drawn to rereading, and there's books that I'm going to reread, and I think with the GoodReads reading function, I'm definitely more inclined to reread, and it's definitely inspired me to do more rereading. And I know I'm definitely going to be reading this one probably fairly soon, which is The Stranger by Albert Camus, because this was the book pick for the Existentialist Book Club, and I've reread this already, but it's something that I need to come back to. I've already planned to reread The Trial by Franz Kafka this year because I'm planning to read all his books chronologically, and to do that I'll have to reread The Trial. And one of my all-time favourites, which I pretty much come back to every few years, is Frankenstein. And I love this book because it is the book that got me into reading, and there's so many layers to it. So coming back to it is like rekindling my passion, reinvigorating my desire to read. And sometimes when I'm on a book slump, I feel like coming back to a book like Frankenstein helps me get back into reading. And I love how every time I reread the book that I get something out of it, I get something different. And also, Frankenstein was released in two different versions. This was the 1880 version, which was the original publication, but Mary Shelley edited the book more, and they released the more popular version, which is the 1831 edition, which most people would have read, but you got the two editions, so you can dip into this book again and again in different editions and get something different out of it. And there's something pleasant about that as well. There's something about that that I really enjoy. Take, for example, something like The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I've read a few times. I've read a translation that I hate and I would never recommend because I hate these translators. I think they're dull, and I feel like they're the Google translations of Russian literature. But then I read this version. This is the Hugh Alpine translation, and I got so much more out of the book because I enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the style, I enjoyed everything more, and I probably was a better reader when I reread it, so I got more out of it, and that definitely helps. But being able to enjoy the writing helps. And I think there's something wonderful about going back to translations and reading the different translations because they're slightly different and you might get something else out of it. And it will still feel like you're reading something new because it is a different translator, it is going to be different. And one of my goals is to have different editions of books like The Master and Margarita in different translations and actually read the different translators and compare them, because I feel like when I'm returning to a book, maybe trying a different translator is going to be a different experience and an extra layer of depth I might get out of it. So there you have it. There's my thoughts on rereading and why I love it and why I'm planning to do more rereading. I would love to know what you think about rereading. Are there books that you have on your list waiting to go? And just talk to me in the comments about what you think are the pros and cons about rereading. And if you want to find me elsewhere, all my links to social media are in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.